Hey guys, Maniac here with GameAccess.net doing my 6th site podcast. This time we're going to be talking about the multi-platform game Dead Space. This is, you can usually find the Dead Space games for the PC, Xbox 360, PlayStation 3. There's been a Wii release for one of the games. There's been an iPhone and iPad game release. It's pretty much on lots and lots of platforms, and there's been an animated movie. There's been 2 animated movies released to DVD and Blu-ray. There's been a graphic novel. There's been and there's also been an animated novel, or an actual novel. So there's been a lot of content. This series started off in 2008. So in 2008, there's been a lot going with this franchise. EA's been putting a lot of weight to it. And I think that's a testament to Visceral for making a fantastic game. I think that's also a testament to EA for just putting a lot of just a lot of good stuff on it. For putting their weight behind their products. It's been a really interesting time. I think a lot of people first became familiar with Dead Space when Mass Effect was just about to get released for the PC. I think basically anybody who pre-ordered the PC version of Mass Effect, instead of getting Mass Effect goodies, I believe were getting Dead Space goodies. Because EA was preparing to release Dead Space, or I should say the first Dead Space game, for that October. And wanted to get the promotion out. I think that made a lot of Mass Effect players kind of mad, because I guess they were hoping for Mass Effect goodies or something like that. But it got the word out, certainly, that EA was working on that. I think what also really helped the game was that the Sci-Fi Channel actually did a production of their Sci vs. Fi series. And they devoted an entire special, basically, to the release of Dead Space. Now, Sci vs. Fi only did specials at the time for major releases. They did it for, I think the first one they did was for Halo 3. They did one for Gears of War 2. They did one for Mass Effect, if I remember correctly. So this was a big thing, that a Sci vs. Fi was being made for Dead Space. So it got my attention, and I think it got a lot of other people's attentions. But the thing was that when it got released, it was October 2008. It was a really tough time. There was a lot of stuff coming out. There were a lot of collector's editions coming out. And Mass Effect kind of got lost between the major releases of that year, which were Resistance 2, Gears of War 2, and the music games, the Rock Band 2, and the Guitar Hero World Tour. Very, very, very expensive releases all around. So, I think that some of the newer properties with EA, like Mirror's Edge, for example, and Dead Space, kind of got put on the back burner. That having been said, I did get the game for Christmas. And I certainly remember playing it on a big screen. I remember playing it on my high definition monitor, because I didn't have my own big screen at the time, and thinking, wow. Especially with the opening. Now, the cool thing about Mass Effect was that all the promotional stuff that they did was also good for basically promoting this whole new universe. They had the animated graphic novel, which was released on PlayStation Network, and they released it on Game Trailers. They also released it on Xbox Live Marketplace, and you can download and watch it, just to set up the whole scene for what's going on with the Dead Space universe and what everything happened. By the time you actually start playing Dead Space, at least the first Dead Space game, everything's already gone to hell, and you don't know when, and it's just bad as it's going to be, and you're being thrown into it without really any knowledge of what is going on. So the backstory really took a cool little side story. If I had one complaint about those Dead Space animated graphic novels, it was that they were censored. Pretty much every version that I saw of it, or I downloaded of it, either online or through Xbox Live Marketplace or PlayStation Network, were all bleeped. And as far as I'm concerned, that is bullshit. These are internet release things for an M-rated game. There is absolutely no reason to censor them, especially given the fact that this is a not FCC controlled medium. Do not censor your crap. So, for the most part, I never get a chance to see those, the uncensored versions of the original graphic novels, and I don't think there's been a release of those until the Wii version of Dead Space Extraction came out. But I'm getting ahead of myself, and I'll talk about that later. Regardless, the whole opening of the first Dead Space game was just so interesting to me and grabbed me so well in that first level that I ended up I became very interested in the expanded universe, and I started seeking out this stuff. And the next day after Christmas, I ended up buying the Dead Space Downfall Blu-ray, just to see what was further going on. And I was hooked on that Blu-ray because I thought it had fantastic acting. It had really cool, really interesting animation. I liked the art style quite a bit. It was different than the graphic novel, but it was its own thing. I really liked the animation style. I thought it was very bright and colorful, which worked, I thought. I thought it really was interesting. And if I had one complaint about it, it was that they didn't use the same voice actors in the game as they had in the animated movie. That having been said, the animated movie did have some great voice actors. They had Jim Cummings, they had... I can't remember. I think Bruce Boxleitner, Kevin Michael Richardson. I believe he was in that because it certainly sounded like him. So there were a lot of interesting moments. I wish that they had taken the cast from that and put them in the game. But then again, like I said, it worked in both cases. But it would have been nice to have the voice actor continuity between the two mediums. So if I had one complaint, it was that the special releases were cool. The special features on the Blu-ray were cool. I ended up watching it with the unknown camera person, and just so you know about me personally, I am not a fan of horror. I've never been a fan of horror. I hate horror movies. I always think they're stupid. Very, very rarely will I come across a horror movie that I like. Because most horror movies that I've seen are either so badly made, so badly written, so badly directed, or so badly acted that there's no horror to it. Most horror to me is not scary. I mean, a person running from someone is not scary. A person fighting with someone and beating up whoever he fought instead of running from them, I should say, is not scary. And that's the reason why I am still angry at House of Wax. I was forced to watch that piece of crap, and I basically have that now as a poster child for everything wrong with bad horror movies. If you've ever seen the remake of House of Wax, don't. But there's just no point of watching it. But I remembered seeing it on, on the premium channels, and literally the whole movie is about a bunch of idiots running from people that are not scary, and basically they end up winding themselves and getting killed. The one or two people that actually stand their ground against the bad people beat them up. So I don't know if there was a poster child for ever standing your ground and fighting against insurmountable odds. Maybe that would be it. But that doesn't make it scary. It wasn't scary at all because of that. So there was that. If I could list what probably made me interested in Dead Space in the first place, if I could list that in particular, especially given from the fact that I'm not interested in horror or the horror genre in that matter, it was probably given the fact of there were maybe one or two movies I did like that were scary. And both of them were sci-fi related. One was the Alien series. I did like the Alien series, save for Alien 3. I liked Aliens and Alien 1 great. I thought those were two of my favorite movies of all time. And I liked Event Horizon. So, based off of that, I mean, let's just face it. I mean, if you've ever wanted to see Dead Space the movie, like the actual live-action movie, just watch Event Horizon. Because literally, Dead Space really borrowed a lot of the themes and a lot of the appearances and looks of what space travel would be like and what space would look like, basically from Event Horizon. And that's not a bad thing. That was kind of a good thing because Event Horizon really did have its own type of style. I know it borrowed heavily from Alien, but then again, I mean, anything in horror sci-fi probably would. So there's basically that. You've got a game that's basically severely impacted by Alien and Event Horizon, which is a great thing. And since I liked both of those movies, I got really interested in Dead Space. I saw the reviews of Dead Space, but I still got interested. And when I started playing it, I liked it more and more. I liked the gameplay mechanics, and I liked what they were going for with the game. Now, for those of you who don't know what Dead Space's whole idea is behind it, it's this. You're not a space marine, you're not a superhero, you are a lowly engineer. You're a normal grunt, basically. Your suit that you're wearing is not space armor. It's an engineering suit. It's designed for a working guy. It's designed more to be useful as a forklift than it was to be used as a weapon of war or a suit of armor or something like that, or a spacesuit. It's only designed for small space usage. It's also, your weapons are designed to be cutting tools, explosive tools, basically stuff to be cutting rock or metal, girders, everything else. Not just in outer space, but also for planetary usage. Sure, you have a machine gun at one point, but, you could say that, there were obviously, it was part of the expanded universe that there were Marines that used machine guns, so it made sense. So, there was all that. There was all that. And a lot of people complain, it's like, oh, what's the point? Where am I getting this telekinetic ability? Where am I getting this stasis ability? Where does it come from? Does everybody have that? Is it weaponized? Some people were, the reviewers particularly were asking those type of questions. And the truth is like all those questions were answered in like anything that was released even before the game came out. It was that, yes, this is all purposeful to basically replace things like forklifts and heavy lifting machines and heavy drilling machines. You basically put it into a suit. Was it weaponized? Well, the Marines were using it, so yeah, it was weaponized. Certainly the stasis stuff was weaponized. But not everyone had access to it. Only people who in a suit or had the stuff would be able to use it. There were also medical purposes for it. So it was general purpose things to have. It was all technological, but it was designed for people like engineers and medical people and let's just face it, Space Marines to have. The heavy lifting stuff was basically to lift up heavy stuff, and you get to see that in later things. So it's basically to replace a forklift. You're wearing your forklift. And I like that. I thought it was practical. I really did. And it worked really well that these type of enemies would basically be weak against this type of person. You could always see in like certain types of things that if you just shot, one of these enemies, heck, even if you decapitated one of them, they would basically just shrug it off and keep walking. You had to cut off the limbs, which was different than what it was in other games. So it had its own little type of individual gameplay mechanic, and I really liked that while playing through the first game. I liked the cut off the limbs gameplay mechanic because it was interesting. It made for really, really cool choice of strategies, and it was really, really fun. I thought the level designs were beautiful. I thought the storyline was really interesting. I'm not going to spoil anything. I thought it had a cool twist ending. I liked the boss fights in particular, particularly the big guys, the mid game boss fight, the end game boss fight. I'm not spoiling anything. You kind of could assume that. And let's just face it, by the time I finished that game, I wanted to play more. And I kept going back, and I think I must have played through that game like easily 3 or 4 different times, just on the Xbox 360, because I wanted to make sure that I unlocked everything, and I got all the fuses, and I was able to fully upgrade your stuff. Again, if I had one complaint about that first game, it was that upgrading was very time-consuming and expensive. You had all these different types of weapons, to say all these different types of tools. There was a very, very small amount of... there's a very short supply of upgrade nodes, and not all the upgrade nodes would be able to actually upgrade things. You had to basically spend upwards of about 30 nodes, they're called power nodes in the game, to upgrade one thing. And that was, they cost 10,000 10,000 credits a node. You only find a few of them, and some of them you have to use to open doors and that have access to certain, things. So it was really time consuming. It took me 3 playthroughs to unlock everything and to get the one gun. And then in the final run, I don't know if anybody knows this, and if anybody else can comment on this, please do. The 4th run I decided to do for the game was going to be the my highest difficulty run. I hadn't played through the game on the highest difficulty. I didn't play the game on any difficulty other than easy, but I decided I was going to get the final achievement and make the final run on the highest difficulty. And I was thinking that I was going to be totally royally screwed, because I figured this game would be really, really hard on the highest difficulty, which it was. But when I started playing the game on the highest difficulty, I noticed that I had the level 6 suit, and I didn't know how I had that. The game had actually started off with, I don't know if that was a bug or something, because the game never really got patched, I don't think. But I definitely remember in the Xbox 360 version, when I was playing through the game, that I started off with the level 6 suit. I don't know why. And again, there was another bug in that you can only play it in the highest difficulty after already beating the game. Otherwise, it wouldn't stick. It wouldn't stay in memory. So after that, it gave me a small advantage, but not really that much of an advantage, because I didn't have to buy new suits. I still had to upgrade everything. I still had to get new weapons. I still had to use new weapons and everything else. So my strategy was that I kept it with only 4 weapons. I focused on upgrading all 4 of the baseline weapons: the cutter, the machine gun, the line gun, and the ripper. And on the highest difficulty, I played using only those weapons. And I got stuck for a good couple of months on the brute fight on the 4th level. I actually remember shelving it at one point, because I could not beat the brute. No matter how much ammo I threw at him, I'd just keep running out of ammo, and he would still be alive. So I remember getting stuck with that, but later creating a whole new strategy and beating him. So that was actually, I think, the first game I ever 100%ed. I think that was the first game I ever got the full 1,000 out of 1,000 on. And I'm pretty proud of that. So after all that, I knew I wanted to play more. Then the next year they announced Dead Space Extraction was going to be coming to the Wii. And I was interested all over again. They were expanding the storyline, they were expanding this other things. It was taking place as a prequel game to Dead Space 1, so it was going to share the same timeline as the Dead Space animated novel and the Dead Space Blu-ray and the Dead Space. And so basically you had 3 different things happening at the same time, so that was kind of annoying. But that having been said, it was, while it was released as a Wii exclusive, I had a Wii. I was going to get it. The initial reviews of it were really positive, but the initial sales were pretty much abysmal. And everyone basically attested that to the person, to who owns Wiis. I think that they really misjudged their audience on that one. I really do. And the Wii version of the game did not sell well initially. I think it probably got less than probably less than 100,000 in sales. I bought my copy, but I'm pretty certain there were a lot of people who didn't. I really liked the whole Dead Space Extraction concept. It was a rail shooter, yes, But it really left the door open for a few things. One, that they could tell different stories from different perspectives. One, that made for a cool thing. Two, they had the storyline up front with great voice acting all around. Two. Three, we got to see more of the ship and different spots of the ship, and we got to see, we got to intentionally leave things as they were that Isaac would later find, which I also liked. And four, the upgrades were fair. They had their new type. They had a new type of upgrade system, which was unique to the game, which I really liked. They didn't use the fuses. You instead would find upgrade nodes, and there'd be 4 for each weapon, and each one was individual to a weapon. So you'd have to find them in the areas, which was cool, which was fine. And you'd basically be on a star system for each level. Yes, as a completionist, I was crazy at 5-starring every individual level. But that would upgrade your abilities, like how fast how well your health was and everything else. So it was good in that case, and it would carry over to other difficulties. So there was that. That having been said, because it was a Wii game, there really was no incentive once you basically 5-starred every level to basically do anything else in the game. As long as you had every weapon, as long as you found every upgrade node, as long as you basically 5-starred every level, there really was no incentive to continue playing the game. There was no incentive to play it on the higher difficulties, and there was even no incentive to play the bonus levels. Yes, but they did have the unlockable graphic novel, which was uncensored. And trust me, if you don't have the Wii version of that, you probably can't find the uncensored versions of the graphic novels anywhere. So there was all that, and of course, it was fun as a 2-player game. To basically have a second player, it was cool for that. If you wanted to have a Wii game and use 2 players, it was cool for that. However, I must note that it did make the unknown camera person sick. I distinctly remember playing it like a year ago with the unknown camera person, and they got sick. They got really sick. Motion sick, actually. I don't know if that had to do with the fact that I was playing it at 120 hertz on my television or in progressive scan, widescreen, or whatever, but I definitely remember they got motion sick, and that was kind of odd. But they didn't want to play anymore after that. I don't know if it had to do with the motion, the jerkiness, the moving camera, with them not moving. I don't know. But I don't get motion sick, so I don't know if I'm a good test to that. But the unknown camera person did. So I couldn't get them to play it anymore. And so I didn't really 2-player the game all that much. So after all that's having been said, you've basically got a new type of game in the Dead Space universe with Dead Space Extraction. But it worked. It was its own game. It was on its own platform. But it still expanded the story for me. It was the Dead Space game that I wanted to play. It was more Dead Space of a new type, but it was still cool. I got to see an expanded story, and I like that. I really don't want to go too much into spoilers or anything like that. I really would like to talk about the end of Dead Space, but I'll just save that for the end. I'll tell you what, I'll save all spoilers to the end of the video. And then, after Dead Space Extraction comes out, and it was kind of a flop, there was some talk that they were going to bring it over to other platforms, but there weren't a lot, there wasn't, it's like, well, where are you going to bring it to? Because it was a rail shooter. It was like, where are you going to bring it to? It would work on the Wii, but there was no, the Move hadn't been out yet, so there was like no talk of that. But then Dead Space 2 gets announced, and a lot of people get really interested, including myself. And they, the EA announces that they're going to be bringing Dead Space Extraction to the PS3. That Dead Space 2 was going to expand Isaac Clarke's story. It was going to take place after the events of the first Dead Space game. So we were finally going to, it was a sequel in every respect of the word. And it was going to basically talk about that. So right off the bat, it had me based upon the setting, the story, and the fact that they were porting Extraction over to high definition, which I really liked. They also announced that they were going to be multiplayer, which I know enthused a lot of people. So there was that too. So they were basically expanding everything. just before Dead Space 2, just before Dead Space 2 was announced to come out, they had to delay the game. I think it was originally supposed to come out around October or so of 010. I think it was, no, October 09 maybe. It came out in, was it supposed to be? You know what, I can't even remember now. I think it might have been 010 though. And, no, it was originally supposed to come out in 09, and I think it came out in January 010. So there was that. No. You know what, forget it. I'm not going to even remember. Now that I think about it, Dead Space 2, I think I remember Dead Space 2 had the 1-year anniversary this past year. So, there was, yeah, I'm screwing the dates off. It came out a year ago. So I'm totally screwing up the dates. So after all that, there was going to be another wave of releases. They were, just like the first game, they were going to do a major blitzkrieg of all kinds of different stuff. There was going to be a second animated movie. There was going to be the Extraction release, or I should say re-release. There was going to be the iPhone game. They announced that there was going to be an iPhone iPad game. And there was going to be another mini game, which is going to be released for like the PlayStation Network and the Xbox 360 Marketplace. So there was all this coming out. Just like, but it was even expanded from the first game, and I thought that was kind of cool. They basically gave away the early pre-order puzzle game, the early PSN Xbox Live Marketplace puzzle game as a freebie to anybody that pre-ordered Dead Space 2. And they released Dead Space iPhone shortly around the time of Dead Space 2's release, but the minigame game came out a couple months earlier. So you had the setup already in place. And the cool thing was that they finally started announcing that there was going to be cross-connectivity between these items. And, I think a lot of people love cross-connectivity. They first announced that there was going to be unlocks in the Dead Space minigames. I believe that was, Dead Space Ignition? If there was going to be cross-unlocks in that. If you completed Dead Space Ignition, it would unlock stuff in Dead Space 2. Then they announced that there was going to be unlocks in Dead Space 2 based upon things in Dead Space iPhone. I think you could unlock power nodes in Dead Space 2 from playing the iPhone game. I should say registering the iPhone game. And finally, there was the animated game, the animated video. And I just want to talk about that just a little bit. Oh, I'm sorry. They also announced that there was going to be the Dead Space 1 crossover stuff. So if you had a copy of Dead Space 1, you'd be able to get an exclusive item for that. So they really went all out. I don't think I can remember the last time that EA did something like that, with the exception of, I think it was Mass Effect 2. Mass Effect 2 had a major DLC blitzkrieg, and I think that was a major turnoff for me, if I can say. I think there was just way too much DLC coming out, way too much exclusive DLC coming out, and not enough of it. And basically, it just kind of, instead of promoting me to buy it, I figured if I wasn't going to buy it immediately, there was just no point of buying, because I was only going to be getting, certain things in the game. So that to me actually did, I kind of figured I'm just going to wait for a re-release or something like that, maybe a Game of the Year edition where they would include the DLC. And I think that actually has come out. I think the current versions of Mass Effect 2 have come with the DLC, or have come with certain levels of DLC included with it, like DLC codes. And if that's true, please leave a comment about that, because if that's true, then I'll just buy the game, because I've been waiting for that. So after that sidetrack, I'm just going to bring up the games just a little bit. Dead Space Ignition, I think, got really abysmal scores, but I think that it was going for something that people weren't expecting. It was a series of minigames. To me, the minigames were kind of addictive. It also had a branching story. I liked the art style that they were going for. They were going, again, for a different type of kind of graphic novel, because they were using panels. It wasn't totally animated in that respect, that it was full animation, but it told graphic novel panels. It had an interesting story. It had an interesting branching story. That having been said, I only liked about one total story in it. You got some of the other branches I didn't like very much. But that having been said, the first way I played through it, as far as I'm concerned, was the canonical ending, and all the rest were just bonus endings. So it was, again, another game that I was able to 100%. I was able to get all the achievements in it. And it was free, so I really can't complain that much about it. And it unlocked not only unlocked secret areas in Dead Space 2. For anybody who hasn't played through Dead Space 2 or doesn't own a copy of Dead Space 2 and might be interested in owning a copy of Dead Space 2, do not play Dead Space 2 or do not start playing Dead Space 2 until you've played through Dead Space Ignition. And the reason why is because there's a lot of different stuff like suits, text files, nodes, and weapons that you can only get after having beaten Dead Space Ignition at least once. Particularly the hacker suit. I think there's like one weapon. I think it was like there's like a special gun. And yeah, so there was all that. Plus there was the there was the pre-order rivet gun. Which, yeah, I think there was the pre-order rivet gun. So there was a lot of promotional pre-orders and stuff like that for Dead Space 2. But I was going to get it. That was like something that I was absolutely going to get. So the Dead Space Collector's Edition comes out with all the with the exclusive items and everything else. It was cool. I don't think that a lot of people like the Collector's Edition that much, and I think the reason why is because that the included items were not as cool to justify the price. I thought it was kind of cool. I wish it had come with more. Particularly, I wish it had come with a behind-the-scenes documentary, which it didn't. It only came with a soundtrack, promotional codes for reductions in cost in the Dead Space store. It came with a cool glowing plasma cutter, which I liked a lot, and it came with I think that was it. Oh, I'm sorry, a little index card with artwork, so a little lithograph. It's I don't think it justified the $100 price, but it was a good release nevertheless. I thought it was cool. Plus, it had all the exclusive content like the Dead Space suit. Like it had its own exclusive suit, and I think it had its own exclusive gun along with it. So it's just a mess of DLC, and very few people probably had all the DLC included with it. But that all having been said, even without all that DLC and weapons included, Dead Space 2 was still a really good game. They improved upon the gameplay a lot. It was a lot more fluid, a lot more interesting. I specifically remember I had to rebuy a copy for the PS3 because I was going to buy the PS3 edition because that was the only version that was coming with the copy of Extraction. So I had to rebuy Dead Space for the PS3 and play through that just so I could get the exclusive item for that. And I also bought the Dead Space iPhone game. I remembered around the time that Extraction came out that I was clamoring for EA to make an iPhone game. Or this was again before I think it was before the iPad came out. And I really remembered loving some of the rail shooter games that id Software was releasing for the iPhone, particularly the Doom Resurrection game and later on the Rage game and Rage HD. For the iPhone. Both of which were rail shooters, both of which were really cool. And I thought if they were going to do a rail shooter games that it would be possible to do it on the iPhone. I was slammed by everyone in the EA community on those boards, on the Extraction board, saying, no, don't waste your time, iPhone games are shit, iPhone games are crap, all iPhone games are shit. This was literally what everyone was slamming me about. Everyone universally slammed me for it, just because I asked for that. It's like, oh, iPhone games are shit. They're cheap little games. They're bringing down. They actually said they're bringing down the quality of gaming in general. I swear, that's what they said. I couldn't believe the words that were coming out of some of these people's mouths, and they really had nothing to base that on. I mean, iPhone games are kind of a mixed bag, I'll be totally honest about that. But that having been said, one, there are some really, really good games for the iPhone. There are some really good games for the iPhone. There are some really quality, really good games for the iPhone. Just because there's some bad games for the platform doesn't make the good games any less good. And I think that's what a lot of people don't realize. you're under no obligation to buy bad games. You could if they're free, you know, but you're under no obligation to buy bad games. I mean, I think that probably, I mean, there are some, man, there are, so imagine my surprise after all that hate got posted on the EA forums that Dead Space was going to get announced for the iPhone. But not only that it wasn't going to be a rail shooter game, that it was going to be a Dead Space game. You were going to get all the Dead Space mechanics, all the graphics, all the Dead Space mechanics. You know, you'd be able to move around in 3 dimensions. You'd be able to shoot in 3 dimensions. You'd be able to, you know, just like Isaac, you were going to play as somebody different, but it was going to be a Dead Space game. I thought that was just awesome. I thought that was just great. And I remember day one buying Dead Space for the iPhone. And for those of you who don't know what the Dead Space iPhone game is about, it's literally a prequel to Dead Space 2, which is, again, probably what the animated movie was. I'll talk about that next after I'm done talking about the iPhone game. But I remember somebody was asking one of the producers of Dead Space on their weekly Facebook page at the time about if they were going to see what was going to be leading up to the events that were going to bring up the end of the Spire, or the downfall of the Spire, or the initial attack on the Spire. And he didn't answer the question, but I did. On the comment section, when the guy comments about it, I just wrote in the comment section, because the producer just didn't want to tell anybody, he didn't want to spoil anything. But really, he could have just said it. There was really nothing holding him back from saying it. Is that, yeah, that game has been made. We're going to be releasing, we've already announced it. You will see that in Dead Space iPhone. He just didn't want to spoil what was in Dead Space iPhone, but I didn't have a problem with that, because the guy really wanted to know. So yeah, Dead Space iPhone tells that story. You play as a new character named Vandal, that's just a code name, who uses a voice disguiser. And an engineer basically talked about by the Church of Unitology, which is the church that's fictional in the game, about basically getting the Spire to basically start the attack. Again, it was kind of interesting in a different type of respect, but I just thought it was awesome that they were able to bring the whole game over, and I enjoyed it quite a lot. They brought over a lot. For those of you who have iPads, they actually did improve the game tremendously on the iPad 2. The graphics on the iPad 2, actually, because the iPad 2 had shaders and stuff like that, and graphics packages that the iPad 1 and the iPhone didn't have. I'm sure the iPhone 4 didn't have. So you're going to be able to get a finer detail and higher resolution on that, and I thought that was just awesome. It's also really cool to see on mirror mode. So after all that being said, I wanted to talk a little bit about the second Dead Space movie. Again, I picked that up Blu-ray day one. Again, I enjoyed it quite a bit. I watched it with the Unknown Camera Person again. The Unknown Camera Person had some problems with some of it. I had some problems with some of it too. My only problem with it was that it was a bare bones release. There was not a special edition. There was no special features included with it, except for I think there was maybe a Dante's Inferno trailer or something like that. But that was it. There was no behind the scenes on Dead Space. There was no behind the scenes on the Dead Space animated movie. There were no deleted scenes or storyboards or anything like that. There was nothing included. And that was really disappointing because the first Dead Space movie actually had a lot of that stuff. It didn't have a making of, but it did have behind the scenes stuff like artwork and storyboards and stuff. So it had a lot of stuff. It had enough in the first movie. Why it didn't have anything in the second movie was really disappointing. It was really disappointing. So after all that, I did like the movie on its own merits. Personally, I liked it a lot. I liked the fact that they shifted the art styles. I liked the fact of the initial art styles and everything else. And they were going for a 2D, 3D type of thing, so that the game's real time took place in 3D, and all the flashbacks took place in 2D, and were each done by different animation studios. I've seen that kind of thing done before in like the Animatrix did it, the Batman Gotham Knight series did it, the Halo Legends did it. So it's been done before. It's even been done before with the gaming industry. Dante's Inferno did it too. but it was a new thing for the Dead Space games because the first game was all consistent animations with the whole thing. The unknown camera person didn't like the 3D animation at all. Said all the 2D animation was just fine. Liked the 2D animation quite a bit. All the different styles were fine with them. But they didn't like the 3D animation. So there was all that. B, I liked it. Again, I just had a problem with the fact that there were no special features included with it, especially given the fact that there really wasn't a behind-the-scenes or a lot of behind-the-scenes done for the second game. There was a lot of cool stuff that was included on like YouTube and stuff like that, like the Isaac promotional campaign where Isaac in the office and stuff like that, or the interviews with Steve, the producer. All that stuff could have been ported to the DVD or Blu-ray release or included in the special edition, but they didn't. So I was disappointed about that. Yeah. After all that being said, what's the future of Dead Space? Where are we going to be going with this series? Well, there was obviously there's the Dead Space multiplayer, which is living on. Oh, completely forgot. There was one Dead Space 2 expansion pack released. It was released as a DLC. I believe that's probably going to be the only expansion to the story of Dead Space. There was the free map pack included. There were 3 premium packs of oh god, what do you call them? They were engineering suits, and there was the what was the last thing? Can't remember now. But there was the pre-order promotional stuff. But there was one downloadable single player episode. The Dead Space Severed game. This was interesting in the fact of this was not continuation of Dead Space 2, but a continuation of Dead Space Extraction with Dead Space 2 gameplay. You basically took control of Gabriel Weller, who was a character in Dead Space Extraction, and and he's trying to save Lexine, who is again a character in Dead Space Extraction. So already, anybody who's played Dead Space Extraction, whether it be on the Wii or the PlayStation 3, had an emotional investment in that. Absent from that was Nate. Nate, as far as I'm concerned, was the main guy. Nathan McNeil was the main guy of Dead Space Extraction, as far as I'm concerned. He was the Isaac of Dead Space Extraction. While he wasn't always the playable character, he was the playable character throughout most of the game. I thought he was like the protagonist, certainly the lead of that game. But he wasn't mentioned in Severed. He wasn't included in Severed. And it kind of felt like at the end of Extraction that it was going to be Nate and Lexine that would end up together. But instead, it's clear in the very beginning of Severed that, and in fact in all the promotional stuff for Severed, so I'm not spoiling anything, that Gabe ends up with Lexine. So what happened to Nate? That's like the one thing I was always curious about. Like what did happen to Nate? Why did Lexine go with Gabe instead of Nate? We all know what happens to Gabe at the end. I'm not going to say what happens in Lexine at the end. So, could Nate come back? He's alive, certainly he could. Don't know what happened. I'd like to know what happened to him. And if there was a Dead Space 3, which I think is probably in development, unless Visceral is working on the next Dante's Inferno sequel, which is possible, like Dante's Purgatory or something. I really would like to see if they did a Dead Space 3, that it was going to be, that there would be something like that. Now, what's going to be the future with Dead Space? Well, as far as I know, there's been no announcements of any further Dead Space games officially. There was some talk around the time that Dead Space 2 was coming out, that there were other ideas being kicked around by the development house. I've heard of everything ranging from a social game, about mining, to, another full-fledged game, to a multiplayer action game, to a single-player action game. I've heard, there's been a lot of ideas. So there was all that. I mean, in fact, if I can remember correctly, this was way before I think even the iPhone game got announced. So there's certainly ideas going, and of course EA is going to really want to basically continue to go out with their successful franchises. They're going to want to continue to release for their successful franchises and push to improve their franchises. I like that about them. Sure, that means that a lot of, there's going to be probably expensive game releases every year, but the fact is that there has not been an announcement of Dead Space 3 yet is kind of a testament to the fact of, they're not milking this yet. They're waiting for it to be right. They're waiting for it to be... If they are working on it, then they're waiting to show it until it's right to be shown and announced. So I like that. And if I have one thing to say about EA, that's a good thing. I think that is a good thing. Don't show it until it's just about ready. Don't promise it and not deliver. That kind of thing. Don't put yourself in that option, because EA has in the past promised things and not delivered on them. Like Command & Conquer was going to have a sequel called Tiberium, which was going to be a first-person shooter game in the Command & Conquer universe, and it got canceled. It got shown and they canceled it. So that was kind of disappointing. So I think EA probably just doesn't want to do that again. That having been said, Inferno was kind of heavily implied that there was going to be a sequel because there's a to be continued at the end of Inferno. So maybe Visceral's working on that. I don't know. I don't know. That having been said, I would like to see more Dead Space. A social game would be fine. Right now, I've been still having a blast playing Global Resistance on the PlayStation Network through my computer. I've been having Disc Reader's been playing it a lot too, actually. I got Disc Reader and I'm playing it. Again, we're not talking, I'm sidetracking a bit. But it's cool that these games are actually getting expanded universes and they're getting all these different types of releases. A Dead Space social game would be cool. I don't know what you would do with it. I guess it would have to probably be strictly about mining, but that's possible. I don't think they're going to do another Wii release because the Wii's on its way out. The Wii U is coming out, so there's that. But then again, you could do another game for this generation. I don't know exactly, but maybe, just maybe, that some of these games are not announcing fourth games because, like, there's been no announcement of another, like, I don't know. All these games are basically, you had a trilogy of games being supported by this generation. It's quite possible that they could be waiting for the next generation to... So that's been my Dead Space memories. It's a great franchise. I can't wait to see what's going on further with it. I hope further stuff does come to fruition with it. I'm going to be looking forward to that, and I'll be anticipating whatever EA has in store for us. Coming up next on the next GameAccess.net podcast is going to be Gears of War, the Xbox 360 platform. Until next time, guys, this is Maniac with GameAccess.net. Over and out.